This video, I'm going to be sharing some of the process for this lime painting that I created for my oiltober challenge. This was my reference. I literally took a lime, sliced it up, put it on a paper towel outside and took a picture and just decided to use that as my reference. So sometimes you don't need anything fancy to create art references. It's literally just a matter of getting a little bit creative with some mundane objects. So I'm taking some cadmium lemon and a little bit of ultramarine blue there, and I'm using solvent-free gel from Gamblin as the medium, and I did this for most of the oiltober paintings. Then I'm adding some titanium white to that, just a little bit, but that titanium white was dried up, so I placed a new dollop on my palette. I'm also placing down some sap green because I'll very likely need that color as well. And I'm adding that to the cadmium lemon with some titanium white. And a little bit more titanium white and cadmium lemon separately, a little heavier on the cadmium lemon, just a separate group of color there I made. Then I'm placing down some yellow ochre onto my palette next to the cadmium lemon because I will likely need that color. So taking more sap green, a little heavier on the sap green with some solvent-free gel, and this is the skin of the lime. I'm starting off with the very top lime. I'm just placing down some of those greens and just to get something on there, something to work with. So I decided to start with the skin. It seemed easy enough, easy color. Then I squished through the ultramarine blue and brought in more sap green to that, and this is to create the darker side of the skin of the lime on the left. As you can see, I'm trying to work very quickly because this was a challenge in painting faster. And I'm just lightly blending that shadow color with the lighter greens I just placed down. And I'm also bringing that color into the other lime that's next to that top one that's just kind of standing upright. I don't even know how I managed to make it stand. It's just like leaning on the other limes. It's such a weird setup, honestly, but I wanted to paint limes. I wanted to paint transparent plant tissues, and so I did. This angle was a little bit challenging because that lime kind of like dips inward, I guess. There's like just the way it curves and just the angle to make it look right, like it is a thicker chunk of lime. So that's why I painted like a more triangle shape down there. Now going into some of the lighter greens, I'm painting on the part of the lime that is not the soft plant tissue, but right underneath the skin. I painted a little bit of green there. Going back to my lighter, more yellowy greens, and I'm just going to paint on a little bit more shape and texture on that skin of the lime. Now I'm picking up some burnt umber, or sorry, that was like sap greenish. Okay, burnt umber into the sap green and burnt sienna, and some ultramarine blue into that. And this creates a black, like a grayish black with some browns. And then I added some titanium white to that, and some cadmium lemon, and I'm just lightening it up with more titanium white, and then some yellow ochre to warm it up, and some quinacridone red, and just combining more yellows and titanium white. So just kind of going crazy there, just combining a bunch of stuff together, and I'm trying to get this warm peachy color, and this is for the inner I guess, I don't know what to describe it. It's not like cartilage, but it's like a thicker underlayer underneath the skin, not quite the softest plant tissue, but it is more opaque, so the light doesn't really go through it just like it does with the plant tissue. And so I'm just painting that underneath the green skin of the lime, and then also I'm going to be shaping the little individual pieces of the lime. The way it's chopped, it's like a slice of pizza almost shape. That's kind of the shape they're making in that plant tissue. So and again, it's more opaque, so it creates that distinction where you can see the little individual I'm just gonna go with segment, the little segments of the lime. I'm not an expert in lime anatomy, but I think you get what I'm talking about. And so yeah, I'm painting that thicker, more opaque section right under the skin of the lime, and it's got a warmer but almost grayish kind of tone to it, kind of brownish it appears. And now I'm moving on to the pulp, which is translucent because the sun is kind of like shining it from the back. And so I'm using my warmer, brighter yellows to create some of those areas. It also really helps that my canvas has been toned with a semi-dark layer of burnt sienna, because all of these bright tones show up when I place them down. If this canvas was blank white, I would not be seeing what I'm seeing right now. And even though I've placed very minimal paint down, I can already see dimension here because of that toned surface, and I'm able to work with highlights, which I love doing. And this is the main reason why I tone my canvases, why I like underpaintings, but mostly to tone my canvases. It's because I like being able to work with highlights. So I am continuing to cover that area of the lime, the pulp. This specific lime is the thinnest slice, and so it's going to appear the brightest, and I'm going to use the most lighter colors, the most yellows there, as the sunlight just kind of goes through it and illuminates the translucent plant tissue. I'm also trying to leave some of those little dividers in each lemon or each lime segment. I'm trying to leave those blank for now. I will cover them and paint over them with a slightly darker color, but for now I'm just leaving the underpainting peeking through so that I still have my undersketch visible. That way I know where to put the color once I'm ready to put it there. And if you look closely, you can see that now I'm using a more intense yellow. I've brought in some yellow ochre into the cadmium lemon, and so this yellow is a little bit darker, and I'm not just using one solid tone for each color. You can see in the reference that the lime pieces actually have little tiny shapes within them because of the pulp and all the plant tissue that's going on there, and there's different shapes within that and the way the light kind of permeates that section. So it's good to pay attention to that and put little sections of colors or use varying tones, not just one solid yellow color or like a whitish yellow, whatever it is. Just really good to pay attention to those details. So now I'm using more heavily titanium white to paint on some of those little brighter parts of the lime that's being highlighted by the sunshine. This reference will be available this month for the rewards. I'm putting out some of the new oiltober references. So yeah, you'll be able to paint it for yourself if you want to observe it more closely, so the download will be available. The other thing with this reference is I actually ended up photoshopping the background because it just looked weird. So I mean, it still looks weird, but for me, all I needed was just to get a certain area covered. The reference itself was a bit different. I did alter it in Photoshop. So now I'm filling in those blank spaces. As you can see, I picked up a warm orangey greenish kind of color, and I'm filling in those blank spaces in between the lime segments. And this is just to create that more opaque plant tissue that isn't quite as translucent. That darker color can also be found in the very center of this lime slice that I'm painting right now. I also go back to that under section of underneath the skin, and just to emphasize it a little bit more, make it look more accurate. And I'm also filling in the center point of the lime. And so really combining these colors together gives the illusion of there being sunlight kind of illuminating the lime. And also once I start working on the other limes as well, that's also going to help bring everything together, because that lime slice alone, it just doesn't look quite like there's true sunshine peeking through, but painting the other subjects next to it is going to help create that illusion. So if you saw what I just did there, I brought in that color into some of the greens with a little bit of burnt sienna up there at the top, just to darken it up slightly. And I'm just trying to make that center point of this lime slice a little bit darker and just put more emphasis on contrast so that it does look more like sunshine is peeking through. So as you can see here, I've already painted the second lime slice with the exact same colors that I used for the very first one. However, it is a little bit off right now because it needs more warm tones, a little bit more of an orange I'm seeing in that lime slice, but I'm not worrying about it too much at the moment. Just trying to get as much covered as I can and speed through this painting because that is part of the challenge. And I'm also using more grayish green tones to paint once again some of those more opaque, the opaque layer that's right under the green lime skin. It's just like the under layer right before the pulp, so I'm just painting that, and now going back to the greens to paint the actual green lime skin above it, or technically in this lime slice underneath it. And I'm also periodically touching up the other slice. Again, like with my other paintings, I just go back and forth between different sections of a painting. So in that case, I just put a little bit more emphasis on the lime skin on the left of that top slice, just to darken it up a bit. And then going back with more bright yellows, touching things up once again, just going back and forth as I usually do. Then going to some of the warm grayish green tones, I'm filling in a blank space of another divider I left open that's separating these segments with the more opaque plant tissue. Now I'm picking up some quinacridone red and cadmium lemon and combining those just to create a more orangey tint, and this is just to touch up some of this other lime there, because as I was saying earlier, it has slightly more warm tones, not quite as yellow as the other one, definitely more orange, and it's also a thicker slice, so it's not going to have as bright of a glow. However, I don't really fully touch it up until later in the painting. At this point, I'm just kind of guesstimating, I guess. I'm also going in with some of the slightly darker yellowish greens, because that part where the lime is right behind the section of that very bright thin lime, there is a little bit more shadow, not quite directly hitting the sunlight. It's like the transparent lime is still, there's sunshine still peeking through, but with the thickness of the other lime, it does create more of a shadow to the left there of the slice I'm currently painting. I really hope I'm making sense. It's really hard to describe some of this stuff. So now I'm going in with some burnt sienna and more greens, and now I'm painting on the other lime piece, the thickest lime slice of the others, and it's this much darker greener shadow there. Then I spontaneously decided to switch to the background. So I'm taking some phthalo blue, some ultramarine blue, and I believe I also took black paint. It's kind of hard to tell. This painting was done a little while ago. And also some titanium white. And so I'm trying to create this like bluish gray color of the background shadows on the paper towel, and no joke, that's really just all it is. It's a paper towel. I needed a plain, simple background outside, and I just placed this paper towel onto our grill outside, and in the sunlight just took pictures on my cell phone. And that is the result. So that's what I'm painting. It doesn't have to be perfectly accurate to me, just as long as it's close enough. I was going to leave the background a little bit more painty anyway. There's no way in heck I was going to try and paint the little textures on the paper towel. I had no interest in doing that. I really wanted smoother brush strokes in that area, so that's why I'm just kind of gliding over that with a thicker brush. Now bringing in more titanium white into that color, I'm just blending in with the shadow tones. Started off with the shadows, now going into some of the more lighter parts of that paper towel. I'm also inventing here because once again my actual reference was a little bit different. I'm just improvising. I'm not trying to get it to look perfect. I just want to create some painterly impressions of a shadowy white background. It could be a cloth, it could be some kind of a surface. I don't know. I really didn't care what exactly it looked like. My focus on this painting was the limes. So I brought in some quinacridone red into that color. I'm now painting the shadow underneath the limes. So I'm using the same colors I made for the paper towel background, but I brought in more blues because it's quite dark if you look right under that lime. And now I'm going to be going back to some of the greens. I just switched my focus, went to the background, now going back to what I was doing. This is a slightly lighter green than I was using for the shadowy parts of the lime, but again, if you pay attention to the reference, there's varying levels of shadow, I suppose, on that lime. So right next to that little corner that's basically touching the other lime in the back of it, it's brighter because that sunlight is still peeking through. And illuminating that section of that lime, like the brightest lime is kind of like casting a bit of a glow on the closest part of the thick lime, and then as the other part of the lime is further away from it, it's going to be darker. So the goal here is just to get some of those dark tones down before I go in with the light tones, and that's where there's going to be a little magical aha moment and it just kind of comes together. But for now, I'm just placing down some of those shadow tones. Then picking up some of the lighter yellow just to fill in that blank space that I left. There's some underpainting peeking through. I'm just going to paint that soft glow that's being cast by the other lime. And then I picked up a little bit of extra titanium white, and I'm starting to paint on, once again, the little thicker opaque tissue that's lighter, and you can see it's the divider of the lime segments. So with the other limes, it appears darker than the pulp, but in this case, it's going to appear lighter because it's in the shadows, and so there's not really light illuminating it, and that pulp is going to be like a thicker, darker area, and then the brighter, I don't know, cartilagey, that's not the right word for it, but it's going to appear brighter. It's so thick and opaque, light reflects directly from it versus going far into the lime, if that makes any sense. I'm so sorry if this is confusing. I'm trying to explain this to the best of my ability. But I'm now bringing in more titanium white and creating the very, very soft orangey color and just starting to paint on that little section of the lime that's in the sunlight. Not as much in the shadow, but there is some sunlight touching that lime. This painting was very much an exercise in lighting and just combining different colors to create the illusion of light, because this was my first time painting limes and let alone limes in the sunshine, and so I really wanted to challenge myself with something I had not done before and see if I can create that illusion. So again, now I'm just painting on more of that plant tissue, the dividers, I guess, of the segments. And it's these particular moments right here that make painting so fun for me, because you're almost sculpting. It's like you're carving something, but you're not. You're just smushing paint around on a surface. But it kind of feels like carving in a way. So this is a grayish, bluish color I made for once again, going back to the shadowy parts. I also briefly went back to one of the other lime slices. I mean, I did periodically just kind of alternate, but whenever I put more paint on a surface, like if I paint one section of a painting, I think it looks good, cool, moving on. And then I move on to another section. And the more I get done in the painting, the more that initial part I painted looks like it needs fixing to me. So that's kind of what's happening here. And it is a building process. I never just paint something perfect right off the bat. Even with these challenges where I am trying to put more detail right from the beginning, I still need to go back and change things. So as you can see there, I made a bit of an orange color with some quinacridone red and cadmium lemon. There's also some greens there, because in my reference, if you really zoom in closely, you'll see that there's greens in that shadowy part that I'm painting right now. But I'm trying to touch it up and put more of those orange tones that I'm seeing. More of a darker glow, because it's a thicker slice, and I was kind of struggling here. Not gonna lie, it was a bit of a challenge. It just took a little bit of effort just to go back and experiment and see what works and what doesn't. And now I'm going to go back to that thickest lime slice and just continue building on those details. There's just a lot of going back and forth. It's kind of hard to explain specifically, but I'm going to leave this on real time, and then the voiceover is going to pick up again when I start finishing the background, and the timestamp is going to be on screen if you want to go ahead and skip to that part. So at this moment, I'm using some titanium white with a little tint of yellow in it, and this is my highlight color, and I also added some solvent-free gel to it as well. And so what I'm painting is just some of the lightest detail parts of the lime because it is a wet fruit, so there's going to be bits of sunlight reflecting off of the texture, creating these little sparkles almost, if that's putting it accurately. So I'm just putting those tiny little details in places where I see it on the thickest part of the lime, and then again on the thinnest slice at the very top there's sunshine reflecting right over the lime skin. So next I took a dry brush with no paint on it or anything, and I'm just kind of going over the background I've already done. Then I did bring in a little bit of paint, but I'm just smoothing things out a bit more and just reworking that area a little bit, giving it some more texture. Now I'm picking up titanium white, combining some solvent-free gel into that. Once again, touching up the background, but the brightest titanium white parts are for the lightest part now into the foreground, where the most sunlight is reflecting off of the paper towel. I know, super glamorous setup I had here for this painting, but hey, it got the job done, you know? So I'm just continuing to fill in the lightest parts of that paper towel. I really find it silly that I'm referring to my painting reference as me painting a paper towel, but that is the reality. The surface, I'm just painting the surface reflecting all the sunlight, and it happens to be very white because it was a paper towel. But I left one of the shadows blank here, and it was the part of the lime you can see right in the middle, the second thickest lime slice. I'm painting around it currently. That's going to be blank, but it's fine. I am going to go back and touch it up with the shadow colors, same shadow colors that I used for the background. The only thing I'm going to do is just make it a little bit darker to match the reference, because the closer it is under the lime, it's a little bit darker there. I'm going to go ahead and end the voiceover here. The painting footage is going to continue for a few more minutes so you can see how I did the shadows. But yeah, hopefully this has been helpful. This was a really fun painting for me. I really enjoyed it. I think it ended up being one of my favorites from my Oiltober painting challenge. So I hope you guys enjoyed it too. Thank you so much for watching.